What's going on, guys? My name is Logan with West Desert Wheeler. Welcome back to our third round of tire testing. This time, it's actually in Sand Hollow. Our first two were out at Logandale on the Red Rocks there. The terrain is just slightly different, but very, very similar. Overall, we were still able to get a great tire comparison on some sandstone. So in general, I'm just going to take those results as they were. And we're doing this as 10 different tires in a bracket series. Every bracket, go head to head. Winner moves on to the next round. Speaking of the bracket, today's test is the RC four-wheel drive Patagonia MT against the Vudoo KLR Ms. And this is an outlying bracket. It's basically a qualifier to see who goes up against a Jetco Adventurer in round two. So whoever wins today's is going to move on and go into that Jetco Adventurer slot. The other tires that had to do a qualifier before jumping in, because there's 10 tires, it just makes this bracket a little bit weird. We're doing Pitbull Rocks Beast and Power Hobby Armor, and that winner of that competition is going to go ahead into the Proline Crawler G8 head-to-head. So whoever wins that will move into that one, but that's a different video. And guess what? I already filmed it. It's the next video in this tire test series. So hope you guys are looking forward to that. But here in a second, we're gonna go take a look at our tires and see what we've got going on over there. I'm really excited to bring this one to you guys. Again, it's in Sand Hollow, so I had to set a new course as compared to the Logandale lines that I had set up. Again, I'm using chalk as some reference points, as well as sometimes a boundary, although sometimes we can't stay within those boundaries apparently. I used a truck to set the standards of the course, and that was my Vanquish VRD on Portals, and that was riding on Proline Crawlers in G8. It's one of my favorite tires in Sand Hollow, so I wanted to set the bar pretty high to see how the others compared. But overall, I would drive through an obstacle and mark it with some chalk and just say, hey, I want to try and hit these marks and see how other tires compare against them. So that's where you'll see the chalk lines out there. That's what I had set. The truck that I'm using in this series is the Rock Pirates RC Carbon Kraken Pro chassis, which is an Axial SCX10 Pro chassis replacement, although you can do a full custom build like I have done here. Mine has a deluxe transmission. It has Vanquish F10 straight axles with a servo behind the axle mount. We are using a Hobby Wing Fusion motor in this and a Reefs Direct Power 888 servo. So awesome servo in there, plenty of torque, awesome low end control with that Hobby Wing Fusion. And we can creep and crawl it and see how these tires perform and grab. Let's go talk about the tires, then we're gonna get out on the rocks and see how they compare head to head. So here are the tires for today's test. On the left, we've got the Milestar Patagonia made by RC four-wheel drive, and this is their X2S3 compound. Internally, we're using 109mm squid inserts, which are their standard 4.75 height. And there is no ribbing and no belting on the RC four-wheel drive like most of the tires in this test series. However, the tires on the right, these Vudoo KLR Ms, which I believe are an '06 racing tire. Believe it or not, these are a real tire. And I've seen these in real life on a buggy in like 43s, I think. These lugs are ridiculous looking in real life. The sidewall is no exaggeration on the RC size. It looks that crazy on a full-size rig. They're pretty wild tires. But those do have ribbing along the sidewall of the tire as well as belting around the outside of the tread pattern. So in the inside under the tread, there are ribs that run all the way around the circumference of the tire. So pretty interesting there. I would assume that they kind of intended those for like high-speed applications like rock bouncers, something with a lot of wheel speed to help hold that tire together just a little more, make it a little more resilient. But for what I'm doing, I'm not worried about that. It does make it a heavier, thicker carcass, so maybe a little bit harder to get it to conform. Speaking of, for the insert on that one with our SL3D insert, it is a 105mm insert, just to make sure we get a little bit of an air pocket between the outer carcass and that squid insert inside. That's due to the belting. It just makes a thicker carcass, so you need a smaller insert to make it work. Thanks to our sponsors throughout this series who helped make this possible. Vanquish Products for supplying a set of extra wheels to make sure that the wheels are the exact same between the tests. So the ones on the left and the ones on the right are both the KMC licensed wheels from Vanquish. They're the same wheel face, they're just different colors, same offset, we're using the same width hubs, we're using the same scale hardware all the way around. The only difference is the rock ring used. So one of them has the Vanquish IFR ring on the right with that gold slim IFR ring. That actually just keys into the backside of that beadlock ring. That's a pretty cool design. And then they offer different shape IFR rings in different colors that you can choose from. On the left, we got the Trail Ready style beadlock, and that one is just an entire beadlock ring that you have to pick up separate. Thanks, of course, to our friends at SL3D RC for helping keep our tires supported through the testing. I just really wanted to make sure that we had consistency through this testing as much as possible, and having slightly different size tires, being able to get slightly different size inserts from the same person really helped out with this test, so thank you very much, SL3D. As well as boosting performance of the tires with not having sidewalls roll over on side hills and stuff, because the stock foams greatly vary between these brands. And I'm going to swap out inserts if I were to buy these tires myself, so I like having that aftermarket option to level the playing field. Of course, thanks to our friends at Sky RC for helping make both of these tires in this video specifically possible. Sky RC helped out with getting us some awesome tires to put in this test series. The ones on the right were Cody's personal set, so thanks to Cody for letting me take those off his hands for a little bit. And then of course we grabbed a set off the shelf with the Milestars. One final thank you to Rock Pirates RC. They helped make it possible to build the test truck for this entire series, and it's an awesome performer. It's a great way to see which tires have true capability or not, so thanks to Rock Pirates RC. All right guys, that wraps it up. Let's go ahead and get out to the rocks and see how these tires compare head to head. We got the RC four-wheel drive versus the Vudoos. So here we have our RC four-wheel drive Patagonia MTs up first. These are on the black wheels with the large gold beadlock rings. So as we pull up into this V-notch, a little bit of tire spinning. This is a tricky V-notch to navigate. Basically, the lower portion wants to go one direction and the upper portion wants to go a different direction. So you have to time a little turn into it. It can be really tricky, and it's one of my favorite little obstacles out here in Sand Hollow. So here is a chalk line that I have out there for reference. The crawlers were able to go up just right to the right of that chalk line, basically where our tires are. The crawlers were able to pull up that. But this is not a crawler versus Patagonia test. This is a Patagonia against the KLR test. So we're just gonna pay attention to where these are able to drive up versus the KLRs. So we ended up about 1 inch right on that chalk line before it finally pulled up. Now we've got our KLRMs. Again, this is kind of a tricky little entrance on this crack at the bottom here, and we're gonna see a little more tire slipping from these KLRMs against the Patagonias. Now, I don't think necessarily that it's not because they had traction. I think it's because I was on a bad line, and I just didn't quite have the rear end where it wanted to be able to push it up and rotate in there. So I really think that's the case. But let's pay attention to how close we can get to this chalk line, if it will spin or if it will pull it up. Just right on the chalk line, I straightened up for just a second and it pulled it right up and over that hill. So definitely a nod going to the KLRM on that climb for sure. But again, I think it was just more positioning down at the bottom than it was traction issues on the KLRMs at the bottom. So here we have a smooth, flat-faced rock climb. It's a little hard to tell with the contrast on the camera here, but where that chalk line is actually up on a little bit of a bump in that wall. So there's a formation there, and basically it's on the high point of a little nub, I guess you could call it. So we're gonna try and keep our sidewalls against that, maybe use it to our advantage. We're using a little bit of throttle there to get the truck to go up to the next level. And then we've got a little bit of a bump on that back left tire as well. So we're gonna end up having to use some wheel speed or something different to be able to get up that. So just a little momentum there, and we were able to get up. But now the front end's starting to try to go out right. Luckily, we were able to steer and correct that and bring it back left, and trying to stay away from the chalk line as much as possible, but it's just a very difficult spot. So I end up putting my tires across the chalk line just to see if the traction is over there, and that's what I need to do to get up this. But not finding the traction where I want, again, using some throttle, trying to use some wheel speed to try and get up here. A little bit bouncy right there, so you know, maybe it's shock tuning, but it could also come down to compounded tire. Using a pretty big throttle blip there to try and shoot the wall. But overall, just slipping and sliding. This is a very steep climb, and a lot of things I've crawled up this take some throttle. So not particularly surprised that I had to use some throttle, but seeing out of the Winch 2, maybe just drove up it easier than the other. So just gonna try it one more time, see if we could, maybe we hit the line wrong on the first attempt. Apparently not on that bottom ledge, getting offline there and having to take a bit of a reset. So not exactly an awesome showing from the Patagonia there. Again, throttle bumping up, trying to keep the momentum going. End up taking a big tumble and fall all the way back down to where we started. Luckily, nothing happened to the truck there. Here are the KLR M's. Man, that's a little tricky to say sometimes. So trying to follow the same line, but really just paying attention to, can this truck crawl any of these obstacles versus using wheel speed. So I'm probably going to go more on the side of trying to crawl things longer to see if it will crawl them against the RC four-wheel drives. Now the RC four-wheel drives did have one run on them on a muddy and wet day that I'd taken them out in Sand Hollow. So I'd scrubbed the oil off a little bit. But as far as like breaking off the leading edge, they really don't have a ton of runtime on them, so they're still a fairly new tire. Whereas these KLRs have been out of the package for a while and they have been scrubbed in a little more. This is a used set from Sky RC, from Cody's personal truck, so thanks to Cody for letting me take these out and try them. But overall, you're gonna see that these tires just, they do have a little more feathering to the front edge of the tire. I don't think that's a huge advantage in this comparison. Both of the tires had been used, but the RC four-wheel drives were newer. So just how it shakes out sometimes. Not quite finding the line to crawl up this, even though I've spent quite a bit of time. I'm gonna use a little bit of throttle, very similar to the RC four-wheel drive, just a little more pull there. Not quite as much hopping. And then we're lining up to shoot the wall. I didn't use as much throttle and it stayed a little more direct and straight on that approach. So doing pretty well going up that wall. We're gonna try it one more time with the KLRM again to see if maybe we just got offline a little bit. That left rear almost grabbed and pushed, but just still ended up having to take that little bit of a bump. Just stayed in the throttle a little more this time. Lost our momentum. Just searching for traction, and all of a sudden that front hooked up and did pull us up the wall. So I'm gonna give the nod again to the KLR-M. They just seem to want that traction just a little bit more. So this is a fun one. This is the slip and grip obstacle, basically. We wanna stay above the lower line and below the upper line. We wanna get up on this side hill, and this is a very steep wall. So watch these Patagonias. They're slipping. All four wheels and tires are pointed straight. Ideally, this truck should be going straight up this hill. I'm not really like shimmying the front end around to try and get it to, dance its way through. It's just all four tires are slipping, and it actually slipped down below the line on that attempt. So I'm gonna give this one more shot, see if we can get the tires up higher a little bit on the wall. Maybe there's a little bit more traction up there. And we were able to get up. And as it starts sliding left again here, just it can't pull its way further up towards that upper line. It stayed off the bottom line, but it was like there was all I could do to keep it above that lower line. So now we're going to go through the opposite direction, and the way the rock face is shaped, there's actually a difference here in how the truck performs from left to right and right to left. So I'm glad I went both ways on this obstacle. Trying to get the front end straightened up a little bit, and just it loses traction, falls quite a ways down below that line, so I take a quick reset. Again, trying to drive as high as possible because these tires aren't able to pull themselves further up the hill. They are really only losing ground every time we're coming through on this side hill. And then afterwards, I'm going to go off to the right and try and climb as high as I can, but it's too steep. These tires just won't hook up and go up there. So here are the KLR M's. Going to approach it the same as the first run on the Patagonias. And so right here, look at the way the truck is reacting. The tires are gripping, and it's driving the truck forward and uphill. Right there it slips a little bit, but it's able to recover ground, and then I can go back to using my servo to break traction a little bit, and I'm having to work at getting the truck to lose traction to work its way through. So this is a lot of grip and a lot less slip, whereas the Patagonias were just all slip, no grip. So let's try from the left side over to the right with the KLRs. The first shot went so well, I didn't think I needed to do it again. We didn't touch a line, it just drove through. So trying to keep angle on the truck while being able to get it to slide a little bit. These tires actually do not want to let go. They're just all grip. It just wants to drive straight up that hill, which is great for pure forward drive, but sometimes in competitions or even just wreck wheeling, you want to be able to maneuver your truck and get that back tire to slide around a little bit to your advantage. So that's kind of what this test is about, is just how the tires respond to things like that. But this really shows here which one, it just has more forward grip on a flat, smooth surface, and which one wants to just go up the hill. So this one is a long string of obstacles. We've got multiple reference marks here, and then this line here is just a reference of where to start turning uphill. That one ideally would be a boundary. I want to stay left of that line. So this camera angle doesn't quite do justice on how steep and off camber this wall is. So we're dropping in here and we're going to start turning, and pay attention to how much these Patagonias push. Meaning I've got the tires fully turned, but they're not following the direction of the front tire. The rear tire is forcing them to go straight rather than actually grip and turn. Now they do turn some amount, but we're going to compare that against the KLR M, and that chalk line I wanted to stay on above, but it just pushed right over it and really couldn't quite hit that mark. So right here, I have to turn down just a little bit because the truck wants to roll. That right rear is super light. This one, it's kind of a boundary. I want to stay above that with the front tire, and then we can pull across. This is a pretty wicked side hill, and this truck is just very good at side hills because it's low with the awesome center of gravity here. So at this point, we're just going to turn right with the truck, and then we've got a big wall with some ledges and whatnot to try and grab some traction from, but just overall trying to see if I can get this truck to crawl up this. Ideally, as little throttle as possible. I want to rock crawl here. So working it back and forth, there's a ledge up off the front right that I'm able to get on top of right there. And I'm just trying to use that to my advantage, and just a medium throttle bump, just that little bit of momentum got us pushed up to the next ledge, I suppose you could say. So here we are just working back and forth. There's a lot of things to try and grab traction from on this wall. It's just trying to get the truck in the correct spot that it wants to go up there. So working it here, lots of tire slipping, but this is steep and there are ledges. So this is definitely something I would expect tire spin on. Just trying to figure out the line here, but coming out the top where we're approaching, I want to stay to the left of this chalk line. So my front right tire, I don't really want to be on that chalk line. And it pretty well did that. It stayed away from the chalk line pretty good. Now we're just fighting this one last little pocket right there, definitely on top of the line. Lots of tire slipping right here. Just looking for that little bit of traction to get us up and out of there, and there it is. So overall, pretty good. Saw a lot of tire spinning on that final wall. Saw a lot of tire, the front end getting pushed across this side hill. So here come the KLR M's. Dropping in, this is a steep descent. This is a good downhill test, along with steering in the downhill, so you get to see that example of will the tires grip or will they push. So we started out about a ½ inch away from that line, and it held that really, really well. And we're just going to continue to hold this line here. They start to push right here, but that front right tire started to articulate over the formation itself. We get very close to this line, but the tires grab traction again, and we get our steering accuracy back. So really impressive by the KLR M there. Actually a strong amount of control from that front end. So I could keep that way above that chalk line, no problem. I had to use quite a bit of steering angle to get it to do that, but overall, the truck's going where I'm pointing it, so I'm pretty happy about that. Work our way back down this wall. At this point, turn the tires all the way uphill, get the truck to rotate, and then we're going to pay attention to if we can get up on top of that ledge up there, if we have to use throttle, if we can crawl it, see if we can just beat out those Patagonias with these KLR-Ms. It was really close, but I think our back tires just got on a low point and pulled that front end back down off the wall. There we go again. It's super close. We're still in it. It just doesn't quite have the drive to get it to push up and over there. As far as crawling goes, we got to a further up the wall position crawling. But all three times it just wasn't quite able to stick it. That bump there, I used less throttle than the RC four-wheel drives. That bump that we just saw was the same amount of throttle as the RC four-wheel drives, and basically got us the same advantage there. So pretty much a draw on that portion as far as using the throttle to our advantage. Same amount of throttle got us the same amount of gain, but a lot easier crawling right up through this section. And on that lower section, the KLR-M definitely had better drive as well. Got to work it through this top section. Again, just it pulls through it with way less tire spinning. We saw less tire push. And then on that lower section, you just saw better drive out of it. So very impressive by the KLR-Ms. Looking at those tires, I would not expect them to do as well as they're doing. So this one, we're starting off camber, and right here, we're going to turn all the way uphill and try and get the tire to climb up and over this ledge. But right there, the tires start pushing. So I put that reference chalk line on there, and it looks like it climbed up with that chalk line on the inside sidewall lined up with it. So let's take a reset here. It's a really simple little test, but it's an off camber. How much grip does your front end have? Off camber, can you get it to pull the car up and over a ledge? And it looks like it's just going to drive up and over, but it just doesn't. So it pushes along the edge. Finally, almost the exact same spot, that ledge starts to turn out to the right, basically, and it gives you a bigger bite on that tire, and I think that's where we see that tire pull up on, is it just has more of a bite on that surface at that point. So this one, we're turning up right in that little pocket, exact same spot. That was my reference point. KLR-M pulls up way ahead of that chalk reference line. Of the tires I tested this day, that right there was the best result I had seen. So we're going to back it up, see if we can do it again. Because that reference line is what the Krawler did, and it's 4 inches down the ledge. And the KLR-M almost pulls it with that big chunky side lug. Finally, it pulls up, but still like an inch ahead of the reference mark, whereas the Patagonia was an inch behind the reference mark. So again, nod to the KLR-Ms. They're kicking some ass here on these obstacles, and these are just like basic tests. They're not cherry-picked obstacles. It's just, I wanted to find a side hill, I wanted to find a downhill, I wanted to find some climbs. This is a cherry-picked obstacle from one of my favorite trails, Risk Trail, that I have out here in Sand Hollow. The front left tire was absolutely supposed to stay stuck on that top ledge, and it did not. So Patagonia's fallen offline there. The front right sidewall kind of let go on us there. So we're going to take another shot at this. As we push in here, we have to be mindful of where that front Rock Pirates comp bumper goes. We don't want to wedge it under that ledge. And then we kind of want to use the inside sidewall to hang the weight of the truck on and pull the truck up the ledge like that, using the grip of the inside sidewall on that top ledge. And then we have to turn back into it to get our tire position to be on that inside sidewall again. That was definitely the way to do it. That is how it's done. Unfortunately, it took us 2 attempts to get that done with the Patagonia. So here comes our KLR-M. Again, one of my favorite obstacles on this whole trail. So I just threw it in this test series because I think it's a good, fun one. It's a difficult line. There's a lot of good rigs that struggle on this, so that's definitely one of the reasons it's in here. So it almost let go there, but I was able to correct it on steering. Now we're floating our front right tire And then watch this weight transfer as I just slowly straighten the axle. We're on 2 tires right there, and then it just touches down. It's gonna carry that back tire in there. Same thing, we're gonna turn back up to get it back into the inside sidewall, hook the truck on that inside sidewall, and just overall made it easier than our Patagonias did. So it's time to get back to the bench and talk about how these compared. Sydney has some opinions on this as well, so thanks to her support out there on the trails. And we're back to the bench. So, how did these 2 tires compare? I didn't really put up scoring through the results, but I did hint at, which one I thought was doing better. Overall, I think we just flat out saw better traction and performance from these Vudoo KLR Ms. On flat faces, they were able to hold on and grip and pull and control the truck just better than the RC 4-wheel drive. As well as side hilling, it just didn't push like the RC 4-wheel drives did. It just seemed to grip a little bit better and help pull that nose around with more precise steering. It just worked out a little better. The only place we really saw like what could be considered less traction than the RC 4-wheel drives is that very first obstacle when we were spinning tires, but I really think that was more I wasn't on the correct line for the truck to go up yet, and I had to position the rear axle into place to get it to go. Once it was positioned, it grabbed traction and took off, but the RC 4-wheel drive just, maybe I hit that line a little better to start with, but overall, once it was actually in that crack, both of them did just fine, which typically you see. It's kind of hard to demonstrate awesome sidewall testing necessarily, so it's kind of difficult to show. But overall, I think the Vudoo won, so they are moving on into round 2, and these Milestar Patagonias just weren't quite as good. Pretty solid performance in this comparison. Both of them were definitely comparable. I think we just saw slight advantages coming from those Vudoos, and those RC 4-wheel drives just weren't quite able to keep up. So, my name is Logan with West Desert Wheeler. I greatly appreciate your guys' time. I greatly appreciate the support from our sponsors, Vanquish RC, Sky RC, SL3D RC, as well as Rock Pirates RC. Man, everybody with their RC in their names. Way to go. So, appreciate you guys' time. We will see you in the next one. Keep the rubber side down.